Hello, my name is Philippe Girard, a professor in the history department at McNeese State University.
And I'm Amber Hale. I'm from the biology department at McNeese. Welcome to Your Grandma Rocks, where we explore the lives of famous women in history.
Welcome and bienvenue à nos amis francophones. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
On the program today, music, science, and history as we retrace the life of a remarkable woman. She developed a lifelong passion for animals while growing up in the United States. She then moved to Central Africa to study and defend wild gorillas. And she gave up her life for the cause.
Her name was Dian Fossey.
Along the way, we'll sample some songs from Kenya, Rwanda, and the Congo, where she did the bulk of her academic research.
But we'll start with an homage to her hometown of San Francisco.
Of the many great songs about that town, we selected San Francisco, written by Jean Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. We'll listen to the most famous version, sung by Scott McKenzie.
Don't forget to wear flowers in your hair.
If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. If you're going to San Francisco, you're gonna meet some gentle people there. For those who come to San Francisco, summertime will be a-lovin' there. In the streets of San Francisco, gentle people with flowers in their hair. All across the nation, such a strange vibration, people in motion. There's a whole generation with a new explanation. People in motion. People in motion. For those who come to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. If you come to San Francisco, summertime will be a-lovin' there. If you come to San Francisco, summertime will be a-lovin' there.
Bonjour and welcome back to Your Grandma Rocks. We just listened to Scott McKenzie singing San Francisco. Je m'appelle Philippe Girard.
And I'm Amber Hale. Today we're exploring the life of the gorilla expert Dian Fossey.
As you've probably guessed by now, she was born in San Francisco.
Her mother was a former fashion model, and her father was an insurance agent.
Like many of the women we've profiled on the show, she did not have the easiest childhood. Her parents divorced when she was just 6, and her mother remarried just 1 year later.
Dian's stepfather didn't exactly provide the kind of emotional support that a little girl needs. He refused to let her eat at the dinner table with him and her mother. They also forced Dian to cut off all contacts with her biological father.
That's cruel. So Dian turned to animals as a coping mechanism, especially horses. By the time she was a teenager, she was an accomplished equestrian.
When she went to college, her stepfather insisted that she enroll in something practical, like business.
As opposed to something interesting, like history.
Or something practical and interesting, like biology. But Dian loved animals so much that she switched her major so that she could become a vet.
Her parents did not appreciate, and they cut her off financially.
She continued her studies anyway and graduated in 1954. Then she moved to Louisville to take up a job as an occupational therapist at a children's hospital. She also continued to ride horses on the side.
If you like horses, Kentucky is the place to be. She proved very good at connecting with autistic children at the hospital, but that was not her lifelong dream. Going to Africa was her dream.
Is it time for our second song?
Sure, since we're about to head for Kenya, I selected a song from that country called Jambo Bwana. If you ever visited that country, you'll no doubt be familiar with it. It's played non-stop at hotels catering to foreign tourists.
Have you ever been to Kenya yourself?
Yes, in 1993. It was one of the best trips I ever went on. Beautiful country.
What does Jambo Bwana mean?
It means hello, mister, in the Swahili language. That song first came out in 1982 and was originally written by the band Them Mushrooms, but it's been covered many, many times. I selected a more recent version by the Kenyan Boys Choir.
Jambo, jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana, wageni, mwakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata, sote jambo.
Jambo, jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana,
Wageni wetu,
wageni, mwakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
Kenya nchi nzuri,
Hakuna matata,
tena nchi ya kupendeza,
hakuna matata,
nchi yenye amani,
hakuna matata,
tena nchi yenye umoja,
hakuna matata,
Kenya nchi nzuri,
hakuna matata,
tena nchi yenye amani,
hakuna matata,
nchi yenye wanyama wengi,
hakuna matata,
tena nchi yenye umoja,
hakuna matata.
Sema jambo,
Jambo, jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana,
wageni wetu,
wageni wakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
sema jambo,
Jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana,
wageni wetu,
wageni wakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
Kenya nchi nzuri, tena nchi ya kupendeza, nchi yenye amani, tena nchi yenye umoja, Kenya nchi nzuri, tena nchi yenye amani, nchi yenye wanyama wengi, tena nchi yenye umoja, sema jambo,
Jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana,
wageni wetu,
wakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
sema jambo,
Jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana,
wageni wetu,
wakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
Kenya nchi nzuri, tena nchi ya kupendeza, nchi yenye amani, tena nchi yenye umoja, Kenya nchi nzuri, tena nchi yenye amani, nchi yenye wanyama wengi, tena nchi yenye umoja, sema jambo,
Jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana,
wageni wetu,
wageni mwakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
Welcome back. I'm Amber Hale, co-host of Your Grandma Rocks, your favorite women's history show on KBYS.
Et je suis Philippe Girard. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
Today we are covering the life of the primate expert Dian Fossey.
We just listened to Jambo Bwana by the Kenyan Boys Choir. It's a popular song in Kenya, but Dian Fossey did not hear it when she first went to that country. She landed in Nairobi in 1963, almost 20 years before the song came out.
To fulfill her dream of going to Africa, she had spent all her life savings and borrowed against her next year's salary.
A bit of free financial advice. Never go into debt just to finance a vacation.
Unless you're Dian Fossey, of course. That trip led to a lifelong career studying primates.
Sure. The year 1963 was an interesting one for Kenya. That's when the country gained its independence from Britain.
During her trip, she also visited the Congo and Tanzania.
Both of them were also newly independent, like much of black sub-Saharan Africa. It was in Tanzania that she first met Louis and Mary Leakey.
These are two giants in the field of anthropology. Until then, it was widely believed that the earliest humans had evolved in Europe. But they showed that earlier fossils of hominids could be found in East Africa, which completely upended our understanding of the origins of humankind. In a way, we are all Africans.
It was also during that first trip that Dian Fossey had her first encounter with gorillas in the wild. It was a great thrill, but it was just temporary. After a few weeks in Africa, she headed back to Kentucky to resume her job and pay her debts.
Luckily, shortly thereafter, Louis Leakey went on a lecture tour in the U.S. and happened to make a stop in Louisville. Dian Fossey got to meet him a second time, and that encounter changed her life.
Leakey convinced her to become a full-time biologist studying gorillas in the wild.
Leakey is also the one who recruited Jane Goodall to study chimpanzees, as well as Britte Galdekas to study orangutans.
These three eventually became the three leading primate experts of their time.
All three of them women, by the way.
Thank God for female biologists, Amber. The world would not be the same without them. Do you study primates too?
Not formally, but I do a diverse amount of projects on elks, alligators, and even some ocean exploration.
Wow, that sounds interesting. We'll talk about Dian Fossey's own research about our next musical break. She first worked in the Congo, so we'll listen to a song by Taboulé Rochereau, a leading Congolese singer also known as the African Elvis. He was rather prolific. Supposedly he produced 3,000 songs, 250 albums, and 100 children.
100? Wow.
Here's the song Christina by Taboulé Rochereau.
Christina, nakosenga na yo bosananga, nasali nyonso ekoki, mpo tosangana na mariage. Christina, nakosenga na yo bosananga, nasali nyonso ekoki mpo tosangana na mariage. Christina, kanisa moke nyonso olobi na ngai, olobi nalukakisi ye mpo nazwa mbongo mpe tobalana. Nga nakokoka te ya solo Christina, la vie oyo ngai ya bomwana. Nalingi yo ya solo Christina, nakamati desizio na mai na miso. Nakosala mikolo mpona bosana yo mwasi na ngai ya liboso wana mokili. Nakosenga na yo bosananga, nasali nyonso ekoki mpo tosangana na mariage. Christina, kanisa moke nyonso olobi na ngai, olobi nalukakisi ye mpo nazwa mbongo mpe tobalana. Nga nakokoka te ya solo Christina, la vie oyo ngai ya bomwana. Nalingi yo ya solo Christina, nakamati desizio na mai na miso. Nakosala mikolo mpona bosana yo mwasi na ngai ya liboso wana mokili. Lobi kasi motema ekokanisa kaka na sherie. Monokwe deside kasi motema ekokanisa kaka na sherie. Kisi na change motema mpo de tolingana kaka na bopauvre na biso. ntango ezali naino vanda moke okanisa ndenge tolingani
Bonjour à tous and welcome back to Your Grammar Rocks on KBYS. This was Christina by the Congolese singer Taboulé Rochereau. Je suis Philippe Girard.
And I'm Amber Hale. Today we're covering the life of primate expert Dian Fossey.
Before our break, we had reached the point where she moved to Africa to study gorillas.
She landed in Nairobi, Kenya in 1966. That's when she met Jane Goodall, who had done some pioneering work on chimpanzees. Dian Fossey studied her methods and then headed to the Congo to begin her own work on gorillas.
Her working conditions were rather primitive. She lived deep in the jungle, only emerging once a month to drive to the nearest village and restock on canned food.
But it was all worth it. She identified 3 groups of gorillas in her region.
She faced some unique challenges along the way. To begin with, how do you tell gorillas apart?
Well, she noticed that the shape of their nose is unique to each gorilla, much like a human fingerprint. So she drew the noses of each gorilla and used those drawings as an identification form to recognize them later on.
That's clever. Second problem, how do you get close to animals that are both fearful and dangerous?
Well, the key was to mimic their actions, to squat and grunt and eat food just like them.
So basically, to approach gorillas, you have to ape them.
Exactly. Also, she adopted a submissive posture so that the dominant males would not see her as a threat.
So what did she discover as part of her research?
Plenty of things, like how gorillas communicate, what gorillas eat, relationships between males and females, and between adults and the young. The fact that she could approach gorillas safely allowed her to explore their world in a way that no one had before.
In many ways, humans were more of a threat to her than gorillas. The mid-60s were a turbulent time in the Congo. The country had gained its independence from Belgium in 1960, but then dictator Mobutu seized power in 65, and rebellions broke out in various provinces like Kivu, where she worked.
In 1967, Congolese soldiers showed up at her camp and arrested her. She spent 2 weeks in captivity before she was released. For security reasons, she then moved her research to Rwanda.
Which is the perfect time to include a song from that country. We'll feature the singer Stromae, who is half Rwandan on his father's side. He's become quite a hit in Europe over the past few years. We'll listen to his most famous song, Papa Outé.
Dites-moi d'où il vient, enfin je saurai où je vais. Maman dit que lorsqu'on cherche bien, on finit toujours par trouver. Elle dit qu'il n'est jamais très loin, qu'il part très souvent travailler. Maman dit travailler c'est bien, bien mieux qu'être mal accompagné. Pas vrai? Où est ton papa? Dis-moi où est ton papa? Sans même devoir lui parler, il sait ce qui ne va pas. Ah sacré papa, dis-moi où es-tu caché? Ça doit faire au moins 1000 fois que j'ai compté mes doigts. Hey. Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es, où t'es, où papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es, où t'es, où papa, où t'es? Quoi? Qu'on y croit ou pas, y aura bien un jour où on n'y croira plus. Un jour ou l'autre, on sera tous papa, et d'un jour à l'autre, on aura disparu. Serons-nous détestables? Serons-nous admirables? Des géniteurs ou des génies? Dites-nous qui donne naissance aux irresponsables, hein? Dites-nous qui? Tiens, tout le monde sait comment on fait des bébés, mais personne sait comment on fait des papas. Monsieur, je sais tout, on aurait hérité, c'est ça. Faut le sucer de son pouce ou quoi? Dites-nous où c'est caché, ça doit faire au moins 1000 fois qu'on a bouffé nos doigts. Hey. Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es, où t'es, où papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es, où t'es, où papa, où t'es? ton papa? Dis-moi où est ton papa? Sans même devoir lui parler, il sait ce qui ne va pas. Ah sacré papa, dis-moi où es-tu caché? Ça doit faire au moins 1000 fois que j'ai compté mes doigts. Où est ton papa? Dis-moi où est ton papa? Sans même devoir lui parler, il sait ce qui ne va pas. Ah sacré papa, dis-moi où es-tu caché? Ça doit faire au moins 1000 fois que j'ai compté mes doigts. Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es, où t'es, papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es papa, où t'es? Où t'es, où t'es, papa, où t'es?
You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS. I'm Amber Hale.
Et je suis Philippe Girard. Nous venons d'écouter Papa Outé par Stromae, un chanteur d'ascendance rwandaise.
Today we are retracing the life of Dian Fossey, who became the world's leading expert on gorillas in the 1960s and 70s.
Before our break, she had relocated her research to Rwanda in the late 60s due to political insecurity in the Congo.
It took a while for her to get a whole new group of gorillas to become accustomed to her presence. They were particularly fearful because only humans they had ever encountered were poachers.
Poachers would kill gorillas to eat as bushmeat or to sell their hands as ashtrays.
Ashtrays?
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Poachers also captured young gorillas to send to zoos worldwide.
Gorillas are very protective of their young. So oftentimes, 5 or 10 adults would have to be killed just to capture one baby.
Even tourism was something that Dian Fossey objected to.
Humans and gorillas are two closely related species, so she feared that tourists would spread diseases like influenza to gorillas that had no immunity to it.
Isn't it how HIV came about?
Yes, but it was the other way around. HIV originated with non-human primates and then was passed on to humans.
The worst poaching incident happened in 1978 when Dian's favorite gorilla, Digit, was killed.
So she transitioned from being a scientist to being an activist. She would not just study the gorillas, but also tried to protect them.
That part of her life is controversial.
The local authorities did little to protect the gorillas, so she took matters into her own hands. She destroyed traps set by poachers and attacked their camps.
She even captured poachers and beat them or humiliated them.
Rwanda is a very poor country, so locals couldn't understand why she would defend primates from hungry people who were just trying to make a living.
The racial dynamics were also complicated. Here was a white woman from the US who was in Rwanda as a guest, and she was acting as the local police. Rwandans had just obtained their independence, so they did not appreciate being bossed around by a white foreigner, even if it was for a good cause. It was the white man's burden all over again, like in colonial times.
Wait a minute, Philippe. I thought that today was supposed to be about biology for once, not a history lesson.
Sorry, I can't help myself.
Anyway, by the early 1980s, after she published her book, Gorillas in the Mist, she was a celebrity.
That book was later turned into a movie starring Sigourney Weaver.
But she had made many local enemies.
We'll see how the story ends after our last musical break.
I sense that this story won't end well.
I'm afraid so. We'll listen to a song that is appropriate. It's about Rwanda and it's also mournful. It's from the soundtrack of the movie Hotel Rwanda.
I remember that movie. It has Don Cheadle in it.
Yes, it's about that horrible genocide that took place in 1994 when the Hutu majority in Rwanda tried to exterminate the Tutsi minority.
Ah, back to talking history again.
Okay, I'll stop. Here is Million Voices by Wyclef Jean.
Rwanda, yeah, Rwanda. They said many are called, a few were chosen, but I wish some wasn't chosen for the blood spilling of Rwanda. Yeah. They said we shocking up and they go, thrown in the fire, but you never get burned. But I wish some didn't get burned in Rwanda. Yeah. They said the man is judged according to his works. So tell me, Africa, what's your worth? There's no money, no diamonds, no fortunes on this planet that can replace Rwanda, Rwanda, Rwanda. Yeah. These are the cries of the children. Yeah. Anybody hear my cry from America? It's the United States of America. Then why can't Africa be the United States of Africa? Rwanda, Rwanda. And if England is the United Kingdom, then why can't Africa unite all the kingdoms and become the United Kingdom of Africa? Rwanda, 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 Rwanda. Yeah. Yeah. These are the cries of the children. Yeah. Rwanda, Rwanda. Can anybody out there hear our cries? Yeah. Heaven's cry. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Lord, can you hear us calling you? Rwanda, Rwanda. Can you hear us calling you? Rwanda, Rwanda. Can you do something? Rwanda, Rwanda. Yeah, Rwanda, Rwanda. Yeah, Rwanda. I'm talking about these. I'm talking about Rwanda, Rwanda. I wanna play my guitar for Rwanda.
Bienvenue à tous. This was Million Voices from the soundtrack of the movie Hotel Rwanda. Je m'appelle Philippe Girard.
And I'm Amber Hale. You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS, a show about famous women from centuries past.
Today we are retracing the life of Dian Fossey.
By the early 1980s, she had become the leading expert on wild gorillas and an advocate for conservation. But she had also made many enemies along the way.
One morning in 1985, she was found lying down in her cabin.
There was a hole in the cabin's wall, which had been cut by her aggressors to get in.
Her face was cut in half by the blow of a machete. She was dead.
Many valuables remained in her room, so the murder was probably not about money. Instead, she must have been punished for her forceful campaign against poaching.
She was buried near the cabin, right alongside her favorite gorilla, Digit.
She had a lot of enemies, so the list of potential suspects was long. Authorities in Rwanda first arrested some of her staff members, but one of them killed himself in prison before he could be tried, and the others were released.
Rwandan authorities then accused an American scientist who had been working with Fossey at the time, named Wayne Maguire.
He left the country, and authorities in Rwanda convicted him of the murder in absentia.
The U.S. refused to extradite him, so Maguire still lives in the U.S. today. He insists he had nothing to do with her death.
I guess we'll never know who really killed Dian Fossey.
Probably not. Her cabin was destroyed during the genocide in 1994, so what remains of her legacy is the foundation that she set up to defend gorillas, which still exists today.
She never had children, so she wanted to leave all her money to the foundation after her death.
And we're talking about real money. Between her successful book and the movie that was based on it, her estate was valued at about $5 million.
But her mother attacked her will in a U.S. court, saying that it had not been properly signed and registered, and she won.
That seems unfair.
Indeed, Dian Fossey had not had a happy childhood, and she dedicated her whole life to gorillas, so you would think that the money should have gone to her foundation instead of her mom.
As often in this program, I'll conclude by saying that this was an amazing life story, even though it had a sad ending.
Indeed. What a life. We're glad we could share it with you.
Nous sommes heureux d'avoir pu partager cette histoire avec vous.
This program was funded by a Juliet Hardner Grant for Women in the Humanities. For more information on how to help finance fellowships at McNeese, contact the Foundation at 337-475-5588.
This program was also sponsored by the History Department at McNeese. To apply for a degree in history or maybe biology, contact the McNeese Admissions Office at 475-5504.
Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Merci et au revoir.